I quit being a professor to push a trash cart. The VP said I was wasting my life, but I'm sleep peacefully every night. The office building was silent at 2 a.m. The only sound was the low, mechanical hum of the HVAC system pushing cold air through the vents. Elias pushed his gray rubber cleaning cart down the hallway of the 40th floor. One of the front wheels had a flat spot. Thump squeak. Thump squeak. Elias was 38. He was tall, thin, and wore a gray polyester uniform that bunched at the shoulders. He wore black work shoes with thick, oil-resistant soles. To the day staff, he was just a shape in the background, a gray blur that emptied the recycling bins and wiped fingerprints off the glass doors. He stopped at a cubicle. He reached into the small wastebasket, pulled out the plastic liner, tied a knot in the top, and dropped it into the black bag on his cart. The movement was efficient. Muscle memory. He adjusted the wired earbuds in his ears. He wasn't listening to music. He was listening to a lecture on Stoic logic recorded at a university in Chicago. The professor's voice was dry and monotone. Epictetus argues that we are disturbed not by things, but by the view which we take of them. Elias nodded slightly. He moved to the next cubicle. He didn't hate this job. He had chosen it. 10 years ago, he was an associate professor of European history. He spent 12 hours a day in a cramped office, arguing with department heads about budget allocations and reading poorly cited essays. He had a stomach ulcer and chronic insomnia. Now he pushed a cart. He worked alone. He clocked out at 6 a.m. He went home to a clean, quiet studio apartment. He read books he actually liked. He slept for 8 hours. He turned the corner toward the executive wing. The hallway here was wider. The carpet was thicker. Most of the offices were dark, but at the end of the hall, light spilled out from under the heavy oak door of the vice president's office. Her name was Sarah. Elias knew her routine because he cleaned up the evidence of it every night. He knew she drank 4 iced Americanos a day because the plastic cups were always stacked in her bin. He knew she ate lunch at her desk because there were always crumbs on her keyboard. It was 2:15 a.m. The door to her office was open. Elias parked his cart against the wall and walked to the doorway. Sarah was sitting on the floor. She was surrounded by paper. Stacks of spreadsheets, legal pads, and financial reports were fanned out in a semicircle around her. She looked severe. She had sharp features, a pointed chin, and high cheekbones that caught the harsh overhead light. Her hair was dark, cut in a blunt bob that usually looked like a helmet. But right now, she was pulling at it. She twisted a strand of hair around her finger, pulling it tight until the skin on her scalp turned white. She was wearing a black silk blouse that probably cost $500. It was wrinkled at the waist from sitting. The top button was undone. Her skirt was tight, pencil-cut, restricting her legs even as she sat cross-legged on the carpet. She had kicked off her shoes. They were black stilettos with red soles, lying on their sides near the bookshelf. Her bare feet were flexed, toes curled into the carpet pile. She was staring at a whiteboard covered in red marker. She held a dry erase marker in her right hand. The cap was off. She tapped the tip against her knee, leaving small red dots on her skin. Elias knocked on the door frame. Rap. Rap. Trash, ma'am. Sarah didn't look up. She didn't stop tapping the marker against her knee. Just take it, she said. Her voice was scratchy. She sounded dehydrated, and closed the door. The vacuum is loud. I'm not vacuuming, ma'am, Elias said. Just the bins. Fine. Just be quiet. She looked back at the whiteboard. She wrote the word optimization. She stared at it. Then she wiped it away with the side of her hand, smearing red ink across her palm. Stupid, she muttered. Elias walked into the room. He moved quietly. He picked up the bin near the door. He saw the photos on her desk, framed pictures of a family on a ski trip. The glass was covered in a thin layer of dust. He looked at her again. She was vibrating with tension. She was biting the skin around her thumbnail. It looked raw. He tied the bag. Have a good night, ma'am, he said. Yeah, she said, not listening. She picked up her phone. She dialed a number and put it on speaker. It rang and rang. David, wake up. The projections are wrong. I don't care what time it is. Elias walked out. He put the bag in his cart. He put his earbuds back in. It happened on a Thursday. Elias was mopping the marble floor outside the main conference room. The room had glass walls on 3 sides. It was like a fishbowl. Sarah was inside. She was alone. She was pacing the length of the long mahogany table. She was wearing a gray blazer today. shoulder pads making her look wider than she was. She held a laser pointer in one hand and a stack of index cards in the other. She was rehearsing. "We stand at a precipice," she said to the empty leather chairs. She gestured with the laser pointer, a red dot dancing on the far wall. As Machiavelli said, the ends justify the means. We must be ruthless in our acquisition strategy. Elias stopped mopping. He stood still, holding the handle. Sarah turned around, walked back to the head of the table, and started again. As Machiavelli said, she repeated, checking her index card. The ends justify the means. It is the foundation of our Q3 approach. Elias looked at the wet floor. He looked at Sarah. He sighed. He propped a wet mop against the wall. He opened the glass door. Sarah spun around. Her eyes were wide, startled. When she saw it was him, her face hardened. "I'm busy," she snapped. "I don't need the floor cleaned right now. Come back in an hour." He didn't say that. Elias said. Sarah blinked. She lowered the index cards. "Excuse me, Machiavelli," Elias said. He stood in the doorway. His hands were clasped in front of his gray uniform. He never actually wrote, "The ends justify the means." That's a common misattribution from Ovid's heroids. What Machiavelli actually argued in The Prince was that in the actions of men, one judges by the result. Sarah stared at him. She looked at his name tag. Elias. She looked at his heavy black work shoes. "What?" she asked. "Who are you?" she asked. "I'm the night custodian," Elias said. "You just quoted Ovid," she said. "I read," Elias said. He stepped back into the hallway. "I'll come back to mop later." He closed the glass door. Sarah stood there. She looked at her index cards. She walked over to the whiteboard. She erased, "The ends justify the means." She picked up a marker and wrote, "Action is the proper fruit of knowledge." She stared at the door for a long time. The next night, Elias walked past her office. She wasn't on the phone. She was sitting at her desk, staring at the door. "Hey," she called out. Elias stopped. "Trash, ma'am. Stop calling me ma'am. I'm Sarah." She pointed to the leather guest chair opposite her desk. "Sit down. I have rounds to finish on the 42nd floor." "5 minutes," she said. "I have coffee." Elias hesitated. Then he parked his cart. He walked in. Sarah leaned forward. She rested her elbows on the desk. Her blazer was off, draped over the back of her chair. Her arms were pale and thin. She watched him sit down. She pushed a cardboard cup toward him. Black. Steam was rising from the plastic lid. "So," she said, "Ovid, the Prince, Marcus Aurelius. You're not just a guy who reads at the library. You have a background." Elias took a sip of the coffee. It was burnt but hot. "I have a PhD in European history," he said, "and a master's in philosophy." Sarah's eyebrows shot up. She leaned back in her chair, leather creaking. "A PhD? What are you doing pushing a trash cart?" "Cleaning the building," Elias said. "You know what I mean," she said. She picked up a pen and started clicking the top. Click, click. "You're wasting your life. You have a doctorate. You could be teaching. You could be writing. You could be doing something." Elias set the coffee cup on the desk. "I did that," he said. "I spent 7 years in academia. I spent every waking hour arguing about grants. I graded papers written by students who didn't care. I had high blood pressure at 28. I hated it." "So you quit to mop floors?" "I quit to buy back my time," Elias said. "Here, the work is real. The floor is dirty, then it's clean. The bin is full, then it's empty. No one emails me at midnight. No one asks me to justify my existence. I work 8 hours, and then I go home. My mind belongs to me." Sarah looked at him. She looked around her office. The stacks of paper were higher than last week. There was a sleeping bag rolled up in the corner behind a fern. "But you're a janitor," she said. She gestured to his gray uniform. "People look right through you." "Let them," Elias said. "I don't value their opinion." "You're invisible. You haven't seen your family in 3 weeks, Sarah," Elias said. "I saw my niece's school play this afternoon because I work nights. Which one of us is wasting our life?" Sarah flinched. Her hand tightened around the pen. Her knuckles turned white. "I'm building a career," she said. "I'm a vice president." "And you're miserable," Elias said. He looked at her face. The dark circles under her eyes were covered with concealer, but the makeup was caking in the creases. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "You're always the last one here. You're exhausted. You have a title, but you live in this box." He stood up. "Thanks for the coffee," he said. He walked out. Sarah didn't try to stop him. She sat alone in her office, the silence pressing in against the glass walls. A week later, Elias arrived at work. There was a thick manila envelope taped to his locker in the basement. Inside was an offer letter. Senior Analyst, Strategic Communications. The salary was printed in bold. It was triple what he made now. He walked up to the 40th floor. Sarah was there. She was standing behind her desk. She was smiling. It was a tight, triumphant smile. She looked like she had solved a difficult equation. "I pulled some strings," she said as he walked in. "HR was tricky about the employment gap, but I told them about the PhD. You start Monday. You can report directly to me." She pointed to the offer letter in his hand. "Put on a suit, Elias. Use your brain. Let me help you." Elias looked at the paper. The paper stock was heavy, expensive. He placed the letter gently on her desk, right on top of a stack of spreadsheets. "No," he said. Sarah's smile vanished. Her face went slack. "What? I don't want the job." "Are you insane?" She walked around the desk. She was wearing the black stilettos. She stood 3 inches taller than usual, but she still had to look up at him. "This is 6 figures. This is benefits. This is respect. You're turning it down to push a cart." "Yes." "Why?" she demanded. Her voice rose, cracking slightly. "Are you scared? Are you lazy? You'd rather hide in the basement than take some responsibility." "I take responsibility for my life," Elias said. "You're throwing away your potential." "Potential for what?" Elias asked. "To end up like you." The room went silent. "Excuse me." Sarah whispered. "Look at yourself, Sarah," Elias said. He looked at her hands. They were shaking. A fine, constant tremor. Your hands shake from caffeine. You sleep under a desk. You treat your staff like tools, because you're so stressed you can't see them as people. You have ulcers. You have panic attacks. He stepped closer. "I don't want your life," he said. "I don't want the stress. I don't want the politics. I am happy. I go home and I sleep. I have peace. Can you say the same?" Sarah opened her mouth to argue, but the words didn't come. She looked at the offer letter on the desk. She looked at her reflection in the dark window, her pale face, her frantic eyes, the expensive blouse that didn't fit right because she had lost weight. She sat down on the edge of her desk. Her posture collapsed. "No," she whispered. "I can't." Elias nodded. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I appreciate the gesture, but I'm exactly where I want to be." He turned and left. He went back to his cart. It didn't happen overnight, but over the next month, Elias noticed the changes. Sarah started leaving earlier, first at 10 p.m., then at 8 p.m. One Tuesday, Elias walked past her office. The lights were off. The desk was clean. The sleeping bag was gone. He smiled. 2 months later, 11:30 p.m., Elias was polishing the brass fixtures on the front doors of the lobby. He sprayed the metal polish onto a rag. The smell was sharp and chemical. The elevator dinged. Sarah walked out. She looked different. She wasn't wearing a blazer. She was wearing a wool coat and a thick scarf. She was wearing flat boots. Her hair was down, loose around her shoulders. Her face had some color in it. She looked softer. She saw him. She stopped. "Hey," she said. "Hey," Elias said. "Working late?" "No," she said. She shifted a gym bag on her shoulder. "I went to a yoga class. I just came back to get my charger." "Yoga," Elias said. "That's new." "My doctor said I needed to lower my cortisol," she said. "I took a weekend off last week. I went to Maine. I turned my phone off." "Did the company collapse?" "Surprisingly, no," she laughed. It was a real laugh. Her shoulders relaxed. She looked at him. She looked at his gray uniform, the spray bottle in his hand. She didn't look at him with pity anymore. She looked at him with respect. "I read The Prince," she said. "The whole thing. And it's cynical," she said, "but honest." "Better than the Mesquite," Elias said. She dug into her bag. She pulled out 2 thermos cups. "I brought coffee," she said. "Decaf. For me, anyway. I'm trying to cut back on the shakes." She held one out to him. "I'm not offering you a job," she said. "Just a coffee. Before I go home." Elias put down his polishing cloth. He wiped his hands on his pants. He took the cup. It was warm. "I'll take the coffee," he said. They stood in the lobby of the silent glass tower. Outside, the city traffic moved in streaks of red and white light. Inside, it was quiet. "So," Sarah said, leaning against the security desk. She blew on her coffee. What are you listening to tonight? Spinoza, Elias said. Ethics. Tell me about it, she said. I have time. Elias took a sip of the coffee. It was good. Well, he began. Spinoza argues that freedom is understanding the necessity of things. They stood there for 20 minutes, the watchman and the executive, talking about philosophy in the middle of the night. Neither of them was climbing a ladder. Neither of them was falling. They were just standing still.